Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another Sunday Live. How is everybody doing who is here live? And for those watching the replay, today I have Tyler Kiwala here with me. So we're doing something a little bit different. And we're going to be talking about, from Journey to Truth podcast. Most of you probably know, but if you don't, and today we're going to be talking about a few topics. So the drones and UFOs, that's like super hot topic. People are kind of freaking out about it. There's a lot going on. So we're going to dive into that and discuss kind of some perspectives on that and try to uncover what's really going on here. And I have some messages about it as well. And then we're going to dive into mysterious time runners and time travel, which is really a really prominent big part of this. So, hi, Tyler. Welcome.
What's up? How's it going, everybody? I'm excited to talk about this. It's my favorite subject. The drone stuff it's interesting, but it's already getting old.
I know, right?
I mean, the whole internet is saturated with stuff. And the issue is that like people need to make sure that they're not accidentally engaging in disinformation campaigns, because you can imagine there are groups out there that are actively engaging in disinformation campaigns and, to shape the public perception of what's happening. And they're like attempting to manipulate public discourse and create that confusion. And, they're trying to navigate a fine line right now of like revealing this stuff and concealing it at the same time. So it's, it's psychological warfare. And we just have to, make sure that we can like separate the fact and the fiction and consider multiple sources, because I see people that have already made up their minds. They already know, and they're in the comment sections like, oh, you guys are naive, but it's just drones. It's just this, it's just that, or it's the Galactic Federation. It's a positive ET showing themselves. I mean, it's probably all of it. I don't think anybody can sit here and actually claim that they really know just because you saw a tweet that said something from some guy who, leaked some information. It's probably all of it. And, CNN's involved in some of this stuff. Like that one guy was saying that CNN was at his facility and they were preparing a cover story for whatever is about to break. We already know that it's a cover story. So whatever we're going to be told is probably not the truth. So just make sure that you're not like accidentally getting caught in that airwave of the disinformation campaign, because they are real. There are people paid to do that. So we have to consider everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And a good point is like, of course, the government like knows something. They're acting like they don't know anything, or they were mentioning like it could be the Iranian mothership or whatever. But these would not be allowed over our airspace to continue just happening. You know what I mean? Like our military would have gotten them down if they didn't know what it was. But then for the drones specifically, but then for galactic cosmic UFOs, they can blip like in and out. They're fast. So that's kind of a whole different story.
Right. And there is a potential that like factions within the Federation or Solar Warden are showing themselves, and they're working to facilitate, humanity's transition into enlightenment and cooperation with extraterrestrials. So I think it's all of the above. I mean, we just have to be, keep our minds open. And then, I like that we're going to be talking about time travel today, because UFOs, when you talk about the technology that powers UFOs, you're talking about a time travel device. Like, it's not just, it is reverse engineered ET technology, but they're not using advanced propulsion systems that our physics would understand. First of all, we have to understand that all physics are based on an assumed truth to begin with. It was just whoever, it was everyone's best guess whenever our physics, the people who created our education system, decided that this is the base model for physics. And it was probably intentionally handicapped to keep us, running circles. So I don't think you can apply physics to what we're actually seeing in the sky right now. I think we're dealing with some sort of technology that can warp space and time and travel interdimensionally. And just by the very fact that that's even likely the case, then we're talking about time travel, because you are manipulating time and space. and then it takes the conversation into a whole new arena.
Yeah, I like that. Um, yes, 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 yes. And it's interesting. Recently, no, well, not like super recently, in the last like 4 months, 3 or 4 months, I had a training module dream. I told you about this. But in this dream, which it wasn't just a dream, I actually got to meet like face to face some of the Federation members that I've been and some of the even inner Earth beings, Telosians, a Telosian being, Aaliyah, that I've been in contact with telepathically for years now, and I got to meet them like face to face, and they came down in their ship, but I knew as they were coming down and landing in their ship, they were time traveling down, and that was like very like emphasized to me in this training module. Whenever I woke up, they were like, "Yes, that was a that wasn't just a dream. That was a training module to teach me some things and then help prepare me for more face to face contact." But that was the whole thing. Is it was literally like time traveling down here. So that just confirms and corroborates with what you were just explaining.
Yeah, I mean, they warp space and time and traverse dimensions. That's how it works. They're not even in the same frequency as us. Like, if anybody's familiar with Daryl James' testimony, he said all of the extraterrestrials that we deal with in the secret space programs exist in fifth density. And that's why him and others have to be put into a density chamber to push them from third to fifth density so they can even perceive these extraterrestrials like Solar Warden and the Galactic Federation. And when they want to show themselves here, it's a lot of effort to actually lower their density. And that's why they're not just like openly in the skies. And when we do see these craft, I think largely they are ours. I do believe some of the Federation possibly, there's this whole thing where there's this prime directive where the Federation, it's illegal for groups like the Federation to show themselves and show their technology, and because of like laws of non-interference. And there's people that are adamant that that's the case, and we will never see a Federation craft in the sky until it's like time, right? And they'll never break that treaty. But on the same, I don't know. I don't know if that's necessarily applicable anymore. I believe that there's actually workarounds, and they can find workarounds to show themselves, and to publicly acclimate us. And there is a slow, continual public acclimation program that's even in effect right now, that where they are allowed to show themselves every so often to slowly climatize us for an event like this.
Mm-hmm. Right. And then the Federation is working with other factions who do not have that same prime directive that can show up.
Right.
Also, so
right.
That's not part of it.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's so many things to consider when we're talking about these drones and these UFOs and time machines, essentially. If anybody's familiar with Gina Chorus, she's a brilliant channeler. I had she was channeling the Federation one night when we were hanging out, and it was a really, really profound conversation. It was like we were sitting in like a board meeting or something, and there were like the conversation was surrounding like global politics and certain things that they had questions about for us that they wanted to understand. Like they wanted to understand the transhumanist agenda, and like I forgot all the stuff it was, but they wanted a human perspective on like what we thought about it. And it was like this amazing back and forth conversation. And at the end, I was like, would it be possible for you to show yourself in the sky? And they said, yes, we can do that for you. And they said, how would you like us to appear? I said, could you just like appear in a ship or a craft above us? And they said, yes, we'll do that now. And we waited and waited, and we did see like a satellite go across, but it really didn't feel like it. And probably for like 30 minutes and nothing happened. And she checked back in and like, well, for us, we're showing up now, but because of they used the analogy of a Plinko on Price is Right. Like when you drop the Plinko chip and it bounces around, by the time they drop it and by the time it actually shows up in our reality, because they're in a different density, it's time dilation, essentially time manipulation. By the time it shows up for us, for them could be 3 days or 3 hours for us. So what was really interesting was the following evening, we didn't see anything. The following evening, I was like still connected, and I felt them like nudge me. And I was on the couch, and I walked outside, and sure enough, they showed up right there in the sky. There was two of them, and it was like the best UFO sighting I've ever seen. And like it was all the hair stood up on my body, and I was like just telepathically communicating with this craft, and it just popped up, and it just moved ever so slightly, and then it just disappeared, and then another one came, and I just fundamentally knew it was them. But it took almost 24 hours for them to actually be able to show up because of this time difference that we never consider. And that might not be the same for all technologies, but the specific faction of the Federation, whatever they're working with, that's how it worked for them.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, I like that. If you guys would like, I can share a little bit of what I got just to kind of wrap up the drone thing and then move on and go into like the time travel stuff. But I did get contacted by Val Thor yesterday, actually, last night. It's funny because you were just reading that book, Stranger at the Pentagon, with Val Thor, who's a Venusian who came down and was in the Pentagon working with President Eisenhower, trying to help humanity back in the day. And you just read that book, and then I'm about to read it, and then he like shows up. So it's interesting how like reading books and connecting with that energy can bring on that level of contact. Because you didn't you have some contact experiences with him too?
Yeah, I never have, and I never was expecting it. But ever since that whole event happened to me in Springfield, where I almost lost my life, I've been on this new trajectory where these amazing things have been happening. I haven't shared any of it publicly. You know about some of it, but it's just, I don't know where I'm heading, but it's kind of amazing, and I'm still like trying to figure it out and navigate it, so I don't share any of it publicly. But
Okay.
well, I'll share the Val Thor thing just because you asked. I was in the dream. It was a dream, right? I thought it was a dream, and I was in this reality where I was with my family on vacation in Branson, Missouri, and we were in some casino. But in the casino, there was a teleporter, a Tesla teleporter that would take you to Mars. We had already established colonies on Mars, and part of like the experience was you can just teleport to this casino's facility on Mars. So this casino had a facility on Mars and here. So you can go back and forth. And then like one of the cool things to do was like look at Earth from Mars, because no one had ever really got to do that yet. So it was like one of the tourist attractions and stuff. And so it was just really this whole really weird thing. And in the dream, my family was there, and we were taking this group of people. By the way, there were also like, we were already like intermingling with other races of ETs in the casino. It wasn't just humans. But this family asked my dad to take a picture, and he took a picture. But while he was taking the picture, I noticed this one man like shapeshifting kind of into this like green looking ET. And I was like, oh shit. I'm like, are you a shapeshifter? Because I haven't really seen any yet. And he's like, no, why would you say that? And I don't remember exactly verbatim the conversation anymore, but we sat down, and I looked at him closer. I'm like, oh shit, you're Valiant Thor. And then he looked at me, he goes, so you do know who I am? And I was like, yeah, I've seen pictures of you in Margie Kay's presentation. And he kind of smirked, because she would always show the same pictures are in Stranger at the Pentagon. And he looked at me and he smirked. he looked at me and he smirked. And I honestly can't even remember. I probably have the voice note that I saved with more of the conversation, but the conversation left me. But I do remember vividly. So he put his hand on my heart, and he like psychically penetrated my mind, like we were like mind melding. And he put his hand on my heart, and it was so powerful. Like I felt like I was leaving my body. And it was something along the lines of like, we're ready to like use you as a messenger now, but you have to be ready. And I was like, holy shit. And I woke up, and like, it was so real. Like my heart was pounding. I could still feel the presence in the room. And then sure enough, like I had the book Stranger at the Pentagon. I had only flipped through it for research purposes. I'd never actually read the whole thing cover to cover. So I just read it finally. And the major downloads occurred while I was reading it, and just all these connections and all these dots and everything. And then now you're reading it, and so who knows what's next. But
yeah, that's That's awesome. I love that. And I remember in the dream, it was kind of like you were seeing like his true form. And
Yeah,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. No,
Uh,
so Margie, what was funny was in Margie's presentation, whenever he first showed up, she saw like this little, I forgot that it's from some cartoon in like the 70s or 60s or something, this little green Martian guy with this helmet. And
mhm.
that's how like Margie first saw him, as this little green Martian guy. Well, when I saw his true form, it was like the real version of that green Martian. It had like two little antennas. And I was like, oh, that's why he showed up at that cartoon was actually modeled after Valiant Thor. Like it was actually like,
Interesting.
symbolizing Valiant Thor. So his true form, like he showed up here in human form, but he really looks humanoid still, but he had the green skin and he had these two little like antenna things, right? Which is depicted in the cartoon. So I found that
Interesting.
very interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. So yeah, he showed up. He telepathically contacted me last night, and he said, "Read the book." I'm like, okay. And then he said some other things. So I'll just go through kind of what I wrote down real quick because I'll write it down. If I don't write it down, like I'll lose it because I'm just getting like downloads and stuff all the time. Especially recently, like upgrades, promotions, crazy. Tyler, you know what I'm talking about. Like probably tons of people in the audience are they're just feeling it right now. So I see Valiant Thor, and then I see him working with the Pleiadians, Tegetans. He says he knows Talia, which is my Andromedan future me. I've shown on the channel a lot, and he said we've been working on this for quite some time. Earth, the liberation and ascension of Earth. He said we've been working on this for quite some time, and then he referred to me as undercover. And then I wasn't expecting him to comment on this, but he said the drones are a distraction. And I was like, what do you mean? And he said, time travelers are entering the atmosphere, like in crafts and ships, which is what we were just talking about a minute ago. Like, these real galactic ships, these cosmic beings, they have it's like time travel technology to get down here. And then he said, like, I saw a vision of the White House during his time there. And he said, we tried. And he said, we tried. And he also said the evidence is going to be shocking. And whatever evidence is about to be coming up and exposed, he says it's going to be shocking. And then he said that we had to bring special forces in after he left to complete the job, like assisting in the ascension. He also mentioned like Monroe Institute and listening to binaural frequencies to help activate new dormant parts of the brain. So that was kind of like something personal. It went into something personal, but you guys might be interested in listening to things like that to help activate more of your telepathy and activate new parts of your brain, not new parts, but dormant parts. So he mentioned that. And then I was tuning in, but I was like, but aren't there already tons of cloaked ships here? Yes, there are tons. There are cloaked ships here because I've seen it to where they're like littered, like the sky is riddled with these cloaked ships. And I'm like, so what ships are coming in? And then I saw like a big ship coming in, like felt like mothership, like bigger ships coming in. So I guess there's like a bunch of scouts that are stationed here, smaller ships, but then there's like a big and I heard this is a big deal. So that's what I got from Valthor last night.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think was it Emma DiMartino who posted that cloud ship over Vegas that was just like blew my mind. It looked like it belonged over Mount Shasta.
Yeah.
And it was like a three-tiered. I'm like, that, come on. Like, that is them. That is something. Like, I felt it. And, those cloud ships, those lenticular vehicles, I really had like trouble. I had a problem with those for a while because I was just like, I don't know, man. Like it's just so many people like they just start calling every cloud a UFO. But then, through Daniel Salter's work in Life, in the book Life with the Cosmos Clearance, he talks about the lenticular craft that can take the form of a cloud, and they explain in the book the technology, how they do it. They just have to match the like barometric pressure, or I forget what it was that they have to do it, but it's a pretty solid science, and they can literally be cloak themselves in a cloud and you wouldn't know the difference. And
Right.
it was the first time I had seen that actual technology explained. For a while I was just like, I don't know if I can get on board with this one, but but I believe that's the case. I do believe that that ship was probably, I don't know, maybe a mothership or not, but it was something.
Yeah. Yeah, tons of cloaked cloud ships. I'm just checking on the chat real quick. I wonder if we should take any like questions or comments on that before we move on to the time travel stuff. Well, it looks like everybody's doing good. Remember, a lot of that stuff with the drones and stuff is just a distraction. Okay.
Well, and yeah, exactly. So I seen the one where like, okay, somebody flew their drone, their personal drone up to one of the drones, and as soon as it got to it, their drone shut off and fell straight to the ground and crashed. And okay, so what are we looking at here? Some of these drones are shooting laser beams, what look like laser beams, at other craft, at stuff on the ground. One of the drones came crashing down in New York City or something, and it was just, I don't know, no bigger than 6 foot in diameter, and it just looked like an advanced, sophisticated military drone. The guy took a picture of it, and he said in his post, he goes, before I could even get any closer, he goes, unmarked police cars came, surrounded it, and picked the whole thing up and took it away. But it looked just like it didn't look like any type of UFO technology, right?
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
You go ahead. Okay. I kind of lost what I was just okay, so you mentioned the UFOs. We're also seeing like some really cool like orbs and stuff that are getting caught. So yeah, just to kind of start like wrapping that whole aspect up. I do feel it is a combination of, kind of like the fake stuff and the alliance messages that I've been getting recently. They've been really cautioning about false flag events coming in. Of course, they're going to try and shake a bunch of stuff up before T gets into office too. There's literally going to be an exchange, or what's happening right now is like an exchange of power,
Right.
over to a transition into like fully, like we're on the golden timeline, but literally the exchange of powers has to happen. So they're kind of like fighting their way, still trying to resist it. So we're like kind of watching that manifest. But then we also have real, authentic UFOs and orbs and more contact things happening. So something that you said I really liked was they're kind of trying to like muddy the waters. Oh yeah, this is a whole other aspect to it. So there's also something happening astrologically, celestially with the alignment. And I got some messages on this a few nights ago. And again, it was mentioned last night, I believe. But with the alignment, and I'm not like an astrology or whatever, I don't really pay attention to that stuff. I know it's important though, and it affects us. But the alignment of the planets, and they specifically mentioned Mercury, and I'm sure a bunch of other things, is ripe for time travel. Like they referred to it as like a portal system, whatever this alignment was, and it's helping to usher in a big shift and allowing a bunch of things to happen. So we've got a bunch of ships coming in that I guess that are taking advantage of this. We've got like the light taking advantage of this portal system, this alignment,
Right.
and then also the dark trying to take advantage of it too. You see like the what's his name, Vatican trying to open up portals or whatever, blah blah blah.
Well, we had Maureen Richmond on our X Spaces the other night, and she was talking about the astrology of all this. And right now we are in what she calls the expansion window, where we would, like, statistically, by her monitoring the patterns, the astrological patterns of UFO sightings, and like you can almost predict when they're going to happen. We're absolutely in an expansion window where we would see an influx of sightings, a UFO flap. And she said, in particular, there's a window surrounding January 1st, like the first couple days in January, where she would even predict a more significant event. So that would be interesting to see if anything like that happens. But going back to this whole like what the transition of power, there's all these narratives now that they're trying to, like, some of these drones are trying to sniff out nuclear bombs or something, because the deep state was planning a nuclear attack on New York City before Trump was inaugurated, to try and like take him out, and so the transition of power can't occur, and that's what the drones are really doing, and that's a military drill or an operation. There's, so many other different things. Like I said, some of these could be literal disinformation campaigns. People are paid good money to put out information and make it seem legitimate. I mean, they've even made documentaries on disinformation before, just to confuse the hell out of us and to maintain their secrecy.
Right. Yeah. So I wouldn't like worry about that too much. But yeah, going back, like I just want to mention again, the Alpha Centaurians specifically came to me at some point in the last week and said mass real sightings are also occurring. So a lot of this I feel like is just kind of like to muddy the waters or whatever, and they're kind of testing public perception too, and then just trying to confuse people. And I don't know, like we're pretty I feel intuitive and do the research, we're kind of down the rabbit hole or whatever. And then talking to kind of like normal, I don't know if I'd say normal people, but more average people. A lot of people are really like freaked out. So it's working on some, some people. um
Right. I mean,
but
you're gonna have a mixed bag of stuff right
yeah.
now. I mean, that's just
Yeah.
about all there is to it. Some people are excited, some people aren't scared. Some people we know better, like they're not actually gonna let anything happen. That's one of the things that is
Yeah.
mentioned in The Stranger at the Pentagon. They like that is one place where they can interfere with our affairs is whenever we're about to blow ourselves up. If we're about to
Mm.
do something detrimental to the planet, they absolutely have authority to step in. And it is never going to happen, a nuclear event or World War III where we're shooting nukes and missiles. That's just not going to happen. Bottom line, as much as they're going to put that fear propaganda out, it's just propaganda. And we need to understand that.
Mhm.
Like, what did you say the other day in your live? They have smoke and mirrors,
Yeah,
and we
they
have
have.
smoking. Yeah, go ahead, say
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, this is a quote. This quote goes so hard from the Alliance. They said, "We have smoke and mirrors." Or no, wait, they said, shit. They said they have smoke and mirrors. We have smoking gun evidence. Like we've got all the evidence to bring them down. They're just literally doing uh this
Right.
smoke and mirror show. Like look over here, deception, smoke, just a bunch of
Right.
BS, basically.
Exactly. Like if you ever needed an example of war propaganda, like rebranded war propaganda, Iranian mothership is it. And Iranian mothership deploys drones over US soils and they must be shot down on site. Like if you were watching a movie, that's what you would expect to see on like some like District 9 movie or something like that would be the war propaganda on it. That's all it is. It's propaganda. Um and then you have the Pentagon in the same breath debunking that, and that's ultimately to create confusion. There's so much, we just have to, like I said at the very beginning, remember to consider all sources because they really are trying to navigate balance between, revealing and concealing these technologies and information about extraterrestrial life and, working towards cooperation. What are you laughing at? Yes, that's amazing. No worries. I painted my roof blue. Well, you're smarter than us.
That's I have been getting some kind of messages like this like Black Delilah type event and a potential they may try to pull like the fake alien invasion card, yada yada, all of that, and then like directed. Yeah, we may see some interesting things coming up, but just stay anchored and grounded and in your heart space and have no fear. Like this is just a show. But yeah, that's funny.
Mhm.
So going on to time travelers or these time runner people, do you want to give us kind of an introduction to that, Tyler?
No, you can do it because I forgot to go pee before we started, and I gotta go. Really, I have to go right now, so I'll be right back, and you can you can do that.
All right, fine. Okay, that's fine. Let me see if there was anything else. Okay, well, I'll just share a couple other messages. I didn't listen to the recording of the pilots over the Oregon coast. I know somebody asked that earlier. I didn't hear that. I'm almost getting kind of like, oh, what's up, Jermaine? Uh, thank you, by the way. I'm almost getting kind of like tired of the whole drone thing. I'm like, yawn, move on to the next thing. Come on. You know what I'm saying? But I'll share like a couple messages that I got from Commander Z from the Federation. This was last night. So they were really highlighting I've been hearing a lot about weather manipulation. And they were showing me like storms being created off the coast. And this is not to bring in fear. This is just awareness, I guess. Maybe even like tornadoes or something, but like storms. And it felt kind of like California. And I saw like waves and ocean. They were mentioning like DARPA in controlling the weather, disclosure on that coming. And then he also mentioned the Schumann resonance. And then I kind of, I guess I fell asleep after that. But yeah, so keep an eye out for that. I think they're just the next month is just going to be pretty interesting. I totally went off of talking about time travel.
I know we're talking about weather manipulation now. Time jumpers and travels around here. Now it seems that drones are drowning on all disclosure. Truly, what do they mean by that?
I'm not sure, but I saw time jumpers, so I just clicked on it. Okay, so time runners. Time runners, very mysterious, very interesting. My journey personally has taken quite a big turn over the last, we'll say, especially over the last like 6 months. I've began like seeing these time runner type people. But as you've probably heard me explain on the show before on my channel, and Tyler talks about it a lot too, and on Journey to Truth, that this is like a timeline, a temporal war essentially. And then, I mean, there's so many different roads that you can go down with that, because there's so many different programs that have been started, like positive and negative programs involving time travel. But that's literally kind of like how this war has been manifest and fought, is through time traveler, and kind of in trying to create the timeline, the timeline, whatever faction timeline they want as the main timeline. So we've got a lot of strange, interesting things happening with time. But I've actually been seeing these time runner type people, and I didn't realize this, but they're actually depicted in the Sands of Time book series that Tyler turned me on to. And Tyler, do you want to share a little bit about that book, actually, that book series? I started seeing these people and calling them time runners before I even knew that they were in this book, and that's what they were called, and that's what they looked like. So I was seeing them like separately, and then it was like confirmed through this series, and a bunch of like movies. They're depicted in movies and stuff too.
Yeah, so the books are written by Sean David Morton, who is unfortunately on his deathbed right now. He only probably has days, if not weeks left, and he believes that because he released this classified information in a book series, classified information in a science fiction book series. They're in the sci-fi genre, but if you read the disclaimer at the beginning of the book, it tells you straight up that this is true information that was handed to him by a member of somebody in the shadow government who spent 40 years working with MJ-12, Men in Black, all of the deep, darkest factions of our government. And somehow or another, Sean David Morton was handed this man's diaries before this guy moved on. He didn't die. He moved on. And we learn in the books he moved on, meaning he just time traveled. Like he's somewhere else, not in this time anymore. But before he left, he carefully chose somebody that he wanted to give this information to disseminate the origins of time travel within the shadow government to the public. And he gave it to Sean David Morton, and Sean had to sign NDAs actually to even take this information, take these diaries, and he was given permission to release it in any way he deemed fit for the public. But you have to change some of the names of the people and locations. Mm-hmm. So that's what he did. He started releasing these books. He was wrongfully imprisoned for 4 years. While he was in prison, he developed throat cancer, which he says they gave him throat cancer in prison somehow. And he got out. Whenever he got out, he was starting to lose his voice. He lost his voice, and now the cancer has won, and he is only days away from taking his last breath. So,
and I just want to add something on that real quick. That's like, them literally taking away his voice. It's very symbolic of them
Yeah.
trying to silence him
Right.
and basically taking over his throat chakra with cancer. So I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, no, I 100%. That's what I thought immediately. I'm like, oh, they're like literally taking away his voice. So, by the way, there's 2 more books in the series that are not out yet, but his wife is going to do whatever she can to get them out after he moves on. So they will be released. So we will have the whole picture. Essentially, we're just gonna have to tell the story for people to understand. Um, Phil said, amazing book and story, very legitimate and filled with a lot of gaps and puzzle pieces. Yeah, like it fills in an entire missing segment of our history and rewrites our history, essentially. I mean, every unknown, well, not every unknown, but most of the unknowns in ufology are answered in that book. And like, I can't believe I ever had an intelligent discussion about this stuff before I read those books, because I'm like, oh my, you like read it and like, oh shit, like all these theories and opinions that we had and what these, pictures we were trying to paint. And like sometimes we were so far off the mark, it's hilarious. And then you're like, oh, this is what actually happened. So I love that book for that reason. And a large chunk of that history took place in Germany with the Vril Society, and them actually channeling blueprints to develop flying saucers that the Germans, the Nazis, actually took to develop out in the breakaway civilizations of the moon and Mars and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But what was also developed during that time was time travel. The Nazi bell was a time travel device. They didn't know that at first, but whenever they finally turned it on and it disappeared from the facility, it showed up 20 years later in Kecksburg, Pennsylvania. And anybody who knows about the Kecksburg, Pennsylvania the UFO incident, it crashed landed in Pennsylvania, and the people that knew what it was the Nazi bell. How did that happen? It traveled 20 years into the future. Interesting that it was 20 years. Also, the Philadelphia experiment was the same exact thing. They were working with what they call dimensional shift technology. They were trying to get the USS Eldridge to jump back in time 15 minutes before an attack would actually happen, so they can do a preemptive strike, right? Well, the early tests weren't necessarily successful, but the Navy was like adamant on doing a test with men. They were like ready to do this. And unfortunately, it went south, and we know what happened. They got, because whenever something jumps through time, like the molecules, like the matter, our atoms, everything is like, what do they call it? Molecular dissociation. Like everything dissociates and separates. So essentially, we die and then come back to life whenever you jump or go through a portal or anything. And what happened was there was no psychic navigator, what they call a psychic navigator, to know where they were going with this jump with Philadelphia experiment. They didn't actually know where they were going to end up. So whenever it started phasing back in, some of these people literally phased back into the ship itself, and they were like stuck within the walls of the ship and the floor and the furniture and like merged with it. And that's apparently true with like people who time travel or teleport. If you don't know where you're going, you could end up inside of a rock. You could end up inside of something. So the books explain all the trial and error and tribulations of the time travel technology. The reality, it doesn't just explain what happened. It tells you how they did it and gives you the equations for anybody that can. It tells you how to time travel if you know what you're looking at. But apparently, according to the book, there was like they said, I think exactly 5 people on the planet that would even know what to do with those equations if they saw them. So even though like the equations on how to time travel are in the book, we, like our audience, we wouldn't have no idea what to do with those equations. We're not physicists, right? And the physics that we were given in the textbooks were intentionally wrong to begin with. They left out key portions of the equations, or sometimes things would be intentionally flipped. So it keeps you hitting this dead end, and you think that you can't go faster than the speed of light, when that's absolutely not the truth at all. So what they were doing was they eventually were messing with this technology. They were able to teleport a camera to the backside of the moon way prior to the Apollo missions from the Montauk, the Montauk site in, oh my God, where's it at? New York. Or maybe they were in California on this side. I don't remember. Either way, they were able to teleport a camera to the backside of the moon, and they saw
This is
people.
in the 40s, right? This is
Yeah,
40s.
yeah. This is in the 40s. So
Okay.
they saw people there, and it was actually Germans. The Germans like were already on the moon, and they were able to figure that out by sending this camera there. Well, it's a whole long story. Time travel was the only way time travel was invented was because time travelers helped us invent it. So the whole story is time travel isn't even invented yet. Like it was invented at some time in our future, but those time travelers came back in time and left little nuggets for the scientists and physicists who were working on these technologies in the 40s and Philadelphia experiment, all that stuff. They were literally assisting them in developing time travel now. So it's a really weird thing to think about. Like the time travelers from the future came back and helped us like discover time travel now. And the whole name of the game is like they wanted us. The whole reason they brought Bob Lazar into Area 51, they said they wanted to bring in a low-level scientist to come in, look at the sports model UFO, work on it. They let him leave and sing like a bird and tell everybody about it. The whole world is talking about UFOs now while they're in the background time traveling, developing what time runner devices, and they call it a ringed beast. It looks very much like it does in the movie Stargate. Whenever like the Goa'uld, they teleport people up under their craft. It's very similar to that. The first jump room they established was to the moon because there was already bases established on the moon via secret space programs and stuff. So we had, I think it was Cape Malabar radio station. There's a sister location in Florida. There's one on the backside of the moon. It's a communication station for galactic communications. And there's a whole crew that's stationed there 6 months on, 6 months off. That's where they were making their first jumps to. They eventually perfected this technology down to the size of a watch, a smartwatch. In the books, it talks about the smartwatches were a thing way before we ever even knew what a smartwatch was. But it wasn't just a smartwatch. It was a literal time travel device. And all you had to do was punch in the coordinates. It got so perfected. All you had to do was punch in the coordinates and you were there. And the people that made the jumps described it very much as like 1 minute you're here, next minute you're there. It's like such a sophisticated technology that it's literally that simple. So these time runners are people who work for these corporations, these organizations all over the world. And, the whole name of the game is going after this time tech. And not every organization, everybody in the private sector wanted their hands on this time travel technology. So it literally became this temporal war where people were jumping into, like literally time traveling into the vault at Area 51 and stealing classified documents. And the only reason they figured it out was because the floors have sensors on them that determine the weight of, like, if there's weight on the floor in the room, it'll tell you exactly how much weight is in the room at that time. Because if anybody's leaving with a classified document, they'll notice the discrepancy in the weight. It's like a very sophisticated security system. Well, they started noticing like a certain time, like once a week at this one specific time, there would be a discrepancy in the weight, but nobody knew what was happening. Nobody could figure it out. Well, they eventually figured out it was these time runners. They were jumping into the facility and stealing classified documents and leaving with them. Well, that's when they started the whole disinformation campaign. So they started putting they created entire fake programs, false documents, and just started loading their own vault with disinformation. So the enemy, and they let them come and steal the fake stuff, so that they was trying to divert them and distract them. It's like a decoy, right? So they thought they were like striking gold, but they were just getting shit. And it literally became this like temporal war. So all of these time travelers, these time runners, they were all like, everybody was after this time tech, and there's all kinds of different devices and technologies that you can use to traverse time. And they found out that like the wing makers and the ancient aerosite, the crystal that they found is actually a time travel. Like it has to do with time travel. So a lot of the technology
Crystal?
used, yeah, a lot of the technologies used in these devices are actually crystals. And a lot of time travel tech was found in ancient times. And according to the book Time Travelers from Our Futures, that tech was specifically placed by the future time travelers. It was left, you know how when we find like a gear or a watch or something that seems so out of place in ancient history, that was intentionally left there by future time travelers to like further our evolution and our collective consciousness and like help us like move along, right? So it's like it became this temporal war. And whenever they were making these jumps early on, they were creating tears in our time and space, like dimensional tears. And that's when we had all the UFO flaps in the early days because they were literally coming in, slipping in from other dimensions. So then they had to create HARP, and the whole purpose of HARP wasn't to manipulate weather at first. It was to create a frequency net over our airspace to try and seal up these holes that they were creating by being haphazardly experimenting with time travel and creating a tear every time they made a jump until they perfected the technology that essentially conceals you in a magnetic field, for lack of a better term, and it doesn't allow the hole to be torn, permanently torn, right? And it keeps you safe and it keeps the environment safe. And if they want it to stay open, then it just becomes a jump room. And it's just become so convoluted. And there's been so many Mandela effects created. Every time they make a jump, they create a Mandela effect. And they don't even know because you have all these private corporations all over the world experimenting with their own types of versions of time travel devices and time tech. And every time they create a tear, it creates a Mandela effect. And they don't even know what changes. They have no way of knowing what's going to change when they make the jump. And the only way they would ever know is to somehow trace it back. Like it's almost nearly impossible. So like when things change in our reality, like people think it's some like nefarious master plan, like puppet master pulling the strings. They don't know what's actually going to change. Things just change because you're literally like timelines begin merging, and there are an infinite amount of timelines and parallel universes and parallel worlds. And sometimes they're jumping in between worlds and like moving assets between dimensions. And like the show Fringe, that's what they do. Like if a politician dies in this reality, they'll go and pull that same politician from the parallel Earth and bring them over here to fulfill a mission or whatever it is they need to do. And the name of the game is literally it's a temporal war, and people have no idea what's going on. You read this book, it'll blow your mind if it's true, and I believe it's true, and that's why Sean David Morton is like on his way out. I think they're the most important books of our time. If you even want to think you know what you're talking about whenever you have a discussion about this stuff. And I realize I've been rambling, so go ahead.
No, yeah, that was I mean, that was pretty good. Yeah, that was pretty good. Wow. That makes a lot of sense. And something in the Mandela effects. So I've been getting an influx in messages just over the last week or so about like crazy Mandela effect and massive bleed through on a very massive scale. Like I thought like the temporal wars was like over, but like it's like we're like in like the thick of it. Like we're on the golden timeline, but there is so much weird stuff happening with time right now. A lot of things collapsing, merging, and then even before this, I was getting downloads and I was seeing a split with like the higher and like this lower timeline like split. So I need to kind of like tune into that more and see what's
it's
we're
always
on the up.
but we're on the up, but it's always branching out. It's really like it's not easy to understand or wrap your head around, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I was seeing kind of like a labyrinth. But Katie just commented, okay, yeah, obsessed with these books. But so the statue of David, I think Katie might have discovered one of these new mandalas, like in these beings, the star beings in the Alliance. They told me like mass mandalas on a massive scale are incoming, and we may not even know, like you were saying, we don't even know what's changed yet until we start noticing it.
Right.
This just happened over the last week. But the statue of David, I think, I don't know, like didn't have arms before, and now he has arms. Katie says she remembers like seeing.
Yeah, everybody knows the picture where he has no arms, right? But then I did look that up on Google, and just like any other Mandela effect, like you can't really find that it was like a Mandela effect, especially when it's a new one. Like
Yeah.
there's a Reddit forum where people post their when they notice a Mandela effect, they go and post them. So that's where you can go and actually find all the current ones and see if other people are noticing the same things. But if you go on Google, like he always had arms, right? But then there are like, I don't know, it's just really weird. It's a really weird
Yeah.
thing. But yeah, she's probably on to something. The other new one, it might not be new, but I just noticed it was the I'll Be Home for Christmas song. Is I'll be home for Christmas, you can count on me. Well, now it's I'll be home for Christmas, you can plan on me. And people are like, no, that doesn't even make sense. Like, you can plan on me. How does that make sense? But I listened to it and that's what it says now. So it's really interesting to think about how these things are changing and how our reality is being manipulated and altered all the time. Like timelines are continuously being altered every day. Like, and who knows, like in certain groups that are fighting this war, like they're on the losing side and they don't give a shit what they mess up. They understand that they are like destructing the very fabric of time itself. And if you read the book, it said other advanced races have banned time travel technology because the effects are irreversible. They're irreversible. You can only work with what you have and like patch up the holes and move on from there. But the other advanced races do not use time travel tech the way we do, like so haphazardly, because they understand the implications of it. That's why also they don't want to tell us how these UFOs actually are piloted, because allegedly what they discovered was the pilots, the people who were flying these UFOs in our own military, when we were reverse engineering them and figuring out that they were literal time machines, um, these guys were having temporal effects that were disorienting. However you say that, disorienting.
You said that right.
Um, they were having these temporal effects will have long-term health effects that would be um, detrimental to them, long-term detrimental health effects. So anyone who was piloting these ships would, they have a short lifespan. So
Mhm.
you can imagine too, like every time that they fire up these ships, they're time traveling and they're dimensionally shifting. If they just gave the public that technology, like we don't understand the implications of that. So
Right.
it's not like everyone's just going to get their own UFO, because we're not at a place, we're not mature enough to actually be like temporally traversing the universe right now with not even understanding how our own reality works. So
Mhm.
I can understand like the reason for the secrecy on some level, but
Yeah.
it's time we just know about it.
It's time. It's time.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, and also really quick, sorry, that reminded me, Trump is apparently a time traveler depending on who you talk to and what you read. I find it very interesting that Trump has a new watch out, and it's Trump time, and he has a website. He has like a signature Trump watch, and I think that's very like in your face symbolic. Like, I don't know if any other presidents have ever had a signature watch come out, but he has all these different series of watches, and I just think they're like telling you without telling you.
Right. Yeah. Something that I've noticed and what the Alliance has been pointing out to me and kind of teaching me and showing me uh, recently is I mean, there's signs everywhere for this stuff and there's communication happening everywhere. And a lot of these people are time travelers and they know what's coming, or they're like, they're in it. Like Trump in the watch, for example, and tons of other things. Future proves past, right?
Well, and that also is part of the whole temporal war, is the 17 operation, which we won't talk too much about because that stuff gets your channel banned. We learned that the hard way, and we lost every account over discussing that. But
Yeah.
that is a quantum time travel technology that's being used to perform that operation, and
Right.
involving Project Looking Glass. And it says so much itself in the drops. And even one of the drops says time travel is fun or just a coincidence that all this stuff is happening. Like, they're telling you they're time traveling. And like, if you really look at the drops, through the lens of this being a temporal operation, it makes so much more sense. And like that's when time runners come in. Like, how do they do it? Like, they have looking glass technology, but they also have these time runners, these people that who are, you know, the clandestine, you know, operatives, the assets that literally are um, time traveling and fighting
Yeah.
this war in a way we don't even understand.
Right. Yeah, very interesting. I want to touch on looking glass technology real quick in case there's anybody that doesn't know what that is. Can you explain that? I know you got to go soon too.
Yeah, looking glass is, well, apparently, allegedly, it's a reverse engineered UFO or reverse engineered ET technology. It's been described in a number of different ways. Originally, it's like a chair that you would sit in, and it would like basically like mimic or simulate the effects of what your pineal gland can already do. Like we can, that's the secret. We can time travel ourselves, right? We're already time travelers. We could remote view the past, the present, the future. And according to some people, like that quantum physicist that I stayed with in Sedona, who worked 40 years for the shadow government, he trained with the aboriginals around the planet because the aboriginals can literally physically teleport their bodies, and they were training our top men in the military industrial complex how to teleport by having them train with aboriginals so they can literally teleport inside the UFOs that they were recovering because they don't have doors and they didn't know how to get inside, so they needed these men to travel inside. So the looking glass device is really only trying to mimic what we can already do. So we can literally teleport, we can remote view, we can see into the past and the present and the future, different any time, place, and location you want. The looking glass device allows you to do the same thing. And there's a portion of the looking glass that probably looks something very similar to like what we see in Stargate SG-1, where you can what they call walk through the looking glass, which allows you to walk into another, essentially another dimension or another density. And apparently that's how like some of these jump rooms work. And that's how like Daryl James said he had to walk through the looking glass and he ended up on the backside of the moon in an underground facility in the backside of the moon. But just by walking through the looking glass underground in Cornwall, England, RAF St. Maughan, Royal Air Force St. Maughan Air Force Base. But so it's a technology that can see probable futures. It can see into the past. They learn not to mess with the past because it creates a whole paradox effect that's very real. They have went back and made adjustments to our reality to alter the timeline, like the Adjustment Bureau movie. Like they do make adjustments to our reality. They can make adjustments right now, presently, because I mean it's so weird. But that's like it's safer to make a present adjustment than it is to make an adjustment in the past. So if they want to alter the course of our timeline, our trajectory, they can make adjustments now, and that can look any number of ways. But through the looking glass, they can see a probable future, but it's only up to like a 94% accuracy. Then there's like inaccuracies and like all these other like variations and variables that you have to consider at that point. So they never know exactly what's going to happen, but they can predict a probable future. But we change that. And just by knowing the future, you've already changed it. And that's what makes it so hard. So they realized that if they would go into the future, like Andrew Bashago talks about, if they would go into the future and use that information to try and change the course of that event, just by knowing the future, they already changed the timeline, they realized. And any of their intel was no good anymore. So they had to like leave it alone and like try to course correct and make adjustments on how are we going to handle this situation? So since we can't change the future, we need to figure out how we're going to handle it. Because if you try to change the future, then you've changed the outcome, then your intel is no good. It's like this really weird thing.
Yeah, that's interesting. Some good points being brought up. And somebody mentioned the chronovisor, and I do want to touch on that real quick too. But yeah, the other day, I don't know, the Alliance said that like they put Abraham Lincoln into place. And I mean, I feel like to help like abolish slavery and I guess put it on like a specific timeline, I feel like if that was a time travel thing where they like just now, like that could have happened like just now potentially, where they put him into place to change this whole thing,
Right.
which is like a mind blow. But that must have been a very detrimental thing to, you know, go back and do that. So I don't know. I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Go ahead.
that's it. I just want to say that.
Oh. uh, I mean, it's such a fascinating subject that, you know, I was just listening to Ashton Forbes, he's a quantum physicist. He's a brilliant mind, but he is he was talking about time travel, and in his eyes, like he obviously hasn't read the Sands of Times books. I can't wait. I'm trying to get it. I'm like, dude, you need to read these books. Like I know he will read those books, and like it'll fundamentally change what he thinks he knows about time travel, because he's like, I haven't seen the physics yet. But like he's also not understanding that all physics is based on an assumed truth to begin with. So like we have to like go back to the drawing board. And I love that he was interviewing Tom Montauk, who talks about this stuff, who we're going to interview tomorrow actually. But he says Tom is very much of a proponent. He's like, these advanced groups don't use the same physics we do. They have figured out a way to essentially reprogram and rewrite physics. It's not even physics aren't what we think they are. Physics only apply to our 3D perception based on what we believe. Like a fact is only a fact because enough people agreed upon it being a fact. A fact was a theory originally, and enough people agreed that that theory sounds good. Let's make it a fact. So like the very foundation of everything we think we know we have to go back to the drawing board and just throw it away and like expand our minds and start over. And once you do that, like some of these guys who like these physicists who just like they're like banging their head against the wall because they can't figure it out. Well, it was designed to make them do that. Like it's literally designed to keep them hitting a dead end. Like William Tompkins says, every book on this planet, textbook on this planet, is intentional, deliberate misinformation about in every field, mathematics, physics, astronomy, it doesn't matter. It's all intentional, even biology. Like they don't want us to know anything about who we really are. And we have to that's why like going to school is like out the window. Like all these starseeds are like, they don't go to school. They don't want to go to school. And because they understand that indoctrination system is over. That is the problem. Like we got to quit pumping this misinformation, intentional disinformation into our children's heads, because the kids already come in with the awareness now that all this stuff is possible. When they go to school, that's when they're mind wiped. That's when they're programmed. That's when their identity is hijacked. And that's when they become a zombie. They become a number in a system, and they all become a hive mind, and they're all taught to think the same. And, you know, the testing, it's all bullshit. Like there are schools and alternative learning centers, and there are people really in the system trying to change things and work with that. And thank God there is. Inevitably, it's all going to change. But maybe time travelers are working on that too.
Yeah. So I want to go back to that real quick. And the adjustments that you were talking a minute ago, somebody said like the bullet missing, you know, Trump's head potentially.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to like mention that. Him being on the cover of Time magazine is also something kind of interesting.
Very
Like I said,
symbolic.
there's all of this symbology happening, kind of showing you this once you have the eyes to see, or once you become aware of it. But somebody asked, what movies are the time runners in? Which is a great question. So the Adjustment Bureau, and I actually saw, like, I was holding this time travel stone and was like meditating on this, and or just meditating to see what would happen. And I was taken to this area where, what was the base that with the big triangle? Where's like the triangle roof that you were talking about?
Oh, Colorado Springs Air Force Academy, the chapel. That's not a chapel.
Okay. So that's what I was taken to this place. It looked like some sort of like a base or something where the ceilings were like just a triangle, like the whole thing. It was shaped different. But then there were also all of these time runner guys with the hats, watches, trench coats. I see them with like the tan trench coats often in these hats. And there was like a group of them, and they're kind of like scoping me out or whatever. But then there's like all these different portals. So this place that I went with my consciousness, I feel was kind of like a place in between time, where there were all these different doorways two different places and different places in time. But it was really interesting.
Yeah, it's like
But they
a time bubble or a pocket reality. Yeah, I mean that's where like some of these groups are set up at, like outside of time. It's
yeah.
temporal shielding. Yeah.
Yeah, super fascinating. But in the Adjustment Bureau, they depict something kind of like that. The movie Adjustment Bureau. So
Yeah.
that would be a good one to watch. And they kind of depict these beings who aren't human. They look human, but they adjust, make adjustments to alter the timeline. And they have kind of like this map or blueprint that shows how the adjustment is affecting the future probability of what's
Yeah.
going to happen. And so it's really interesting. But then also these these Adjustment Bureau guys who are literally like they look like time runners though. They kind of go into a space in between worlds where there's like these different doorways and they can go through the door and end up somewhere on a complete other side of town. So that's a good movie, Adjustment Bureau. Do you have any other ones?
Yeah.
Predestination, I'm in the middle of watching right now, is another one.
Yeah, that's a great time travel movie. The latest Matrix movie, the newest one, whatever the Revelations, I don't know what it's called. The there's a scene in that movie where a bullet is fired, a shot is fired from a gun, and the antagonist, I forgot his name in the movie, he freezes time and explains time dilation and bullet time. And what he does, so the shot is fired at Trinity, and Neo's going to save her, but then he slows down time. So time slows down whenever you push the button for time dilation. Let's just pretend there's a button. Whenever you apply it, time slows down for everyone but the person who time stops for everyone but the person who pushed the button. And what he does is, while time is stopped, and nobody knows that time is stopping because it happens in a blink of an eye, in an instant. You don't know. You'll never know. But it stopped and something went in and adjusted. And in the movie, they call it bullet time. And what he does is he adjusts the course of the bullet so it misses the target just slightly when time speeds back up. And anybody else in real time doesn't know that time actually stopped and the bullet was course corrected and then time sped back up.
Does that sound familiar, you guys?
Right. Like, what do you think happened with the Trump assassination, right? Like, it's very much a reality that we don't consider because like that technology is so far beyond like a mainstream physicist, because based on their brilliant mind and all the equations they have, it literally can't exist because they've been given the wrong equations.
That's impossible.
Right.
That's impossible.
So, I mean, in that movie, they literally explain it. They call it bullet time, but it's time dilation. And then, the example they use in the movie is changing, like just redirecting the bullet. And I think that it was very much predictive programming with what happened with the Trump attempt.
Right. Yeah. And I want to add real quick, we may not have time to go into this because I know you've got to leave soon. But for people, I've actually received messages about this. Like the ETs and lines have woken me up, like saying like Andrew Basiago, Project Pegasus, like telling me I need to like look into this and research it. But you have interviews with Andrew Basiago, who was in a time travel program as a child. I didn't know he was using a chronovisor. See, I still need to listen to his testimony.
Well, he uses, so they were being used, these children were being used to test out different modalities of time travel, and the chronovisor was one of them. He explains 8 different modalities that we know of and use for time travel. It looks different every time depending on where the technology came from, how it was reverse engineered. He talks about dimensional communication tower, the Lobo Overlook site in Colorado Springs was a tower that was scalar. Well, was designed originally as a scalar antenna by Nikola Tesla in the late 1800s. It's now been taken over by the military, but he claims that is a dimensional communication device that allows us to communicate with other dimensions, which is huge, which is absolutely huge. But his testimony is incredible. The chronovisor is one of the technologies that he describes using. And I think that a lot of people think he's nuts, but you can't, I believe him. I feel what he's saying is true. I mean, I can't sit here and like lay it out for you and like make you believe it, but I believe he's telling the truth.
I mean, I've been getting messages about this. I've been hearing, like, not knowing anything about this, not diving into this world separately, getting messages like woken up in the middle of the night, project looking glass, and things like that. Andrew Basiago. So there's uh his testimony. I've been specifically receiving messages about that to look into that. But anyway, if people want to dive more into that, on your Rumble channel, Journey to Truth podcast on Rumble, you've interviewed him. And do you have a time travel webinar?
I mean, kind of the 17 webinar is very
Careful.
much. Part 2 is all about time travel. So I would highly recommend looking into our 17 webinar parts 1 and 2 if you want to understand that whole operation and how time travel was implemented. We have discussed doing like a Sands of Time breakdown webinar, but it's like a massive undertaking, and we have a lot of stuff going on in our lives. But maybe one day. I am in the process of writing a book right now where I like everything that I shared today, like it's largely in the book, along with a lot of my own experiences that I haven't even talked about yet publicly. But so that stay tuned for that. But yeah, you can follow us on Rumble, YouTube. We're back on YouTube temporarily now, and then now we're on X. We just did our first X space the other night, which was very successful. So if you want to follow us over there, because they wiped us out on all platforms and we had to start over and rebuild. So we're just trying to rebuild and reach a wider audience now, and that's why I'm over on X, because when we did that space that night, we reached 95% of that audience was new people. Like we got out of our echo chambers over on YouTube and Rumble, and it's like, oh, and we're just reaching this whole new. It's time. Like I'm like, we're running out of people to interview in this community. Like we have to move on. So I went over to X. I'm like, oh, this is a whole new world. Like this is where the action is. Like Elon's right when he calls it the town square of the world. That's what it is. Like if you want to know where the whistleblowers are speaking, spilling their beans, they're doing it on these spaces. If you want to know like right now breaking news about anything, like you're not gonna get it anywhere else better than X. Like if you follow the right people. And so I'm trying to reach like the broader audience over there. And so anybody who wants to come follow us over there and like help build our platform so we can, reach audience and really make a dent, put our mark, our stamp on disclosure, then that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, the alliance has really been highlighting X too. Like that's the yeah, I think I mean, it's already big right now, but I think it's also going to be really taking a leading role in this whole movement and disclosure. So, and you guys also have a conference coming up in May that I'm speaking at, and a bunch of other people are speaking at. If you want to chat,
Yeah.
I've got your links in the description as well.
Yeah. So if anybody wants to come out, the whole premise of our conference is to take our favorite people that we've interviewed and bring them to the conference and let them speak on stage. And it's not just that. We have a blast. We have bonfires and sky watches, and it's just this amazing community that gets together, and it's all centered in love from the heart. And we just absolutely have a blast every year. It's in Grafton, Illinois, May 12th through the 15th. Tickets are available at journeytotruth.online, which is where you can find everything that we do, by the way. Journeytotruth.online. You can get your tickets there, learn everything you want about the conference. And yeah, we would love to see you there. It's a blast. Like Lily's speaking for her first time there. This is our 4th annual conference, and it is our last conference in this location for now. So if you want to go to this location, you've been wanting to go, I would definitely take advantage of that.
It's a beautiful location, and there's Sasquatch on the property, and we had a lot of Sasquatch sightings. They were very interactive with us last year, so I'm super stoked about that. And follow me on X too. I just started going on. I just made an account.
Yeah, you need to get over there.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, Tyler. I know you got to get going. And I guess that's about it. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, too. And like this video, drop a comment. Also, if anybody has any comments who's watching this now or in the replay about time travel shows or movies, please throw them in the comments, because I'm like obsessed with this right now.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and there was so much more that like I was trying to like brush through it all. or fly through it all. But there's so many other things that I'm thinking of now that I could have said and should have said. But
maybe we'll do a part 2 if people want to do a part 2 on this, because there is a lot. Like, we didn't even mention the chronovisor, and there's a bunch of other things popping up in my head near the end too. It goes so deep.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe we can do a part 2. All right. Well, thank
and
you.
just get the Sands of Times books. I think it's Strange Universe. I forgot. I can't think of the name of his website right now, but you can find them on Amazon too. Just the Sands of Time series by Sean David Morton. I cannot recommend those books enough.
Yeah.
Timeless is the best show on temporal alliance agents in real time. Thank you, Master Light. I have not heard of that, and I'm going to have to watch that.
Yeah. Okay. Now we're getting all the good stuff. Okay. Everybody says please part 2. Awesome. Yeah, we'll schedule something. And if I'm sure a lot is going to be happening this week, I might do a pop-up live or do a pop-up video or something over the next week. But until next time, I will see you guys later. Bye.
Bye, guys.